Hello and welcome to Heroic Media. I'm Michelle Bauman.
And I'm Patrick Cordova. This week on Heroic Media, our sponsor, Heroic Media, reaches a record number of women with their life-saving advertisements.
A TV anchor in China dies after refusing chemotherapy in order to save the life of her child.
Students at a Catholic high school in Minnesota start a sex education club.
Stay tuned for all these stories and more here on Heroic Media.
So here at Heroic Media, we explore news headlines that deal with a lot of foundational moral issues that are very important to society. A lot of times they're around family, marriage, and life.
Exactly, and those issues also tend to do with the topics of abortion, euthanasia, embryonic stem cell research, human cloning, and homosexual marriage.
That's right. So what's our first story?
Thanks, Patrick. First for today, the pro-life group Heroic Media is reporting that last year was its most successful year ever. Its pro-life ads helped to connect hundreds of thousands of women in difficult pregnancies with resources in their area.
It's wonderful. It's good news.
Really good. Mm-hmm.
Right, so Heroic Media has been in business for 10 years, and in the 10 years, 2014 was the most successful year. And so they put out a lot of communication, advertisements, and reached out to a lot of people. And I think that this is important to note, not just because we're reaching out to more people, but also because there's a lot of people out there that need to be reached out to.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think this is such an important part of the pro-life movement. We can't just say, don't have abortions.
Right.
We have to say, let us give you the resources. I realize that you're in a difficult, scary situation.
Yes.
Here is, the ways that you can, find babysitting and find just something as simple as financial support for doctor's visits and diapers and just connecting women with those resources. And so Heroic Media, of course, is the sponsor of this show, and they have an incredibly strategic approach where they really look at data and have very targeted ads, very research-based methods, which have been very successful. So in 2014, Heroic Media's ads generated some 360,000 responses, and that's an 88% increase from the previous year.
Wow,
so
that's incredible.
Phenomenal growth, absolutely incredible.
That is incredible.
And really saving lives.
Yeah, and I think they really have a smart plan, using different means, different avenues to reach out to people, right? Everybody's connected to technology today, especially younger people, and a lot of times it's younger people that need to hear the good news about life and babies and everything. And like you said, I think Pope Francis also says this very well. He's kind of showed us how to kind of reframe things, right? Because so many times pro-lifers are associated with this just like staunch, view that's just like, very closed off and unwelcoming.
Right.
And so I think reframing how we approach people and how we interact with people, and like you said, just providing them basic common things, right? It reminds me of the Bible, just like, talking about feeding the homeless. You can't say, go forth and, don't be hungry anymore or whatever.
Right.
You actually have to provide food for people, right? And help them out.
Right.
And so I think that Heroic Media really walks the walk in terms of being able to go out there and being creative and really meeting people where they're at and helping them out. And it seems like it's working very well based on the statistics.
Absolutely, yeah. And so they work with local pregnancy resource centers in a bunch of different areas and then just try to connect women to them. And their commercials air on 975 networks each month.
Wow.
So we're talking about a huge, huge reach here.
It's a lot of people.
And they have actually 3 new TV commercials coming out in the next fiscal year. And they just released one of them right about this time. So let's actually go ahead and watch that right now.
My name's Daniel Phillips.
My name's John Blanford.
My name is Shane Eidelman.
I'm a believer in the Lord Jesus.
I've been following Christ since 2001.
I'm the lead pastor of Westside Christian Fellowship.
I lead a home group, disciple a couple of guys.
Write weekly for the Christian Post.
And I had an abortion.
I've had 2 abortions.
I had an abortion.
So I was 28, and I didn't know God. I called myself a Christian, though, at the time. I would go to church a couple of times a month, and I just started dating this gal, and she got pregnant.
We had a passive-aggressive stance. I was neither here nor there, so I never even fought for the opportunity to save the child.
I conceded to an abortion, and even as a pastor, that decision still haunts me today. What would they look like? Would it be a boy? Would it be a girl? Their first steps, saying daddy, watching them grow. But those are just dreams that often leave me heartbroken.
I should have manned up, and I should have fought for you, and I didn't. I didn't. I am so grateful that you are in heaven with Jesus, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and you got to see him before I did. And I know you're going to extend me grace, but it would have been so cool to hang out with you here on earth.
The pain of regret is one of the hardest pains to deal with because the constant reminder that we let down God, we let down others, and we let down our child. And I know I'm not alone because it's been estimated that about 1 in 3 in the church have participated in an abortion. If you've had an abortion, I am so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry for the burdens and the weight that you've had to carry.
I'm so sorry that women were subjected to such a terrible thing and no one tried to rescue you.
I'm sorry for men not taking a greater stand in this area. And I'm sorry that the church has not been there for you.
I'm sorry that you've tried to hide this from everyone.
I'm sorry that this is available.
I am hopeful, so hopeful.
I'm hopeful that this younger generation, you guys, just keep contending for life. As someone who's been on both sides, I'm telling you, keep contending for life. That is my hope, and my hope is to see a generation rise up and say, you know what, no more.
Somebody should have been there to rescue you, but you do have a rescuer. We find hope, we find peace in Christ. You don't have to live in shame and darkness. You can run to God's light of forgiveness and grace and mercy. And even those who maybe know this, but they really haven't lived in that. They know that God's mercy and grace is real, but they haven't felt it. I would just encourage you to turn to Him and allow that forgiveness to take place. Open up your heart. Begin this confession again, repentance if warranted, and turn to Him and say, Lord, I need you today to bring this cleansing and this forgiving aspect to my life. I want to feel that. And God will do that. Jesus will honor that prayer.
Wow, that was a really great video. I really liked a lot of I liked what they had to show.
Very powerful. So these are men who are Christian and maybe have converted, or maybe they always were Christian and they made a mistake, and they all had or participated in an abortion. And so they talk about their own sorrow and their own regret, and they're also their hope and their healing. And I think that's important because they're able to connect with the people in their congregation, because statistically people who are Christian and who go to church are also out there having abortions. So it's important for them, I think, to be able to relate to those people and share their own story.
Yeah, like one of the gentlemen in the video, and it was kind of surprising when, you know, the first minute or so of the video, these people are introducing themselves, you know, hey, I'm a Christian, hey, this, that, and they're giving a little background of themselves, and then all of a sudden, you know, the common thing between all of them is that they've had an abortion. And I thought the video was great for several reasons, but one of the reasons that I liked it especially was coming from a man's perspective, is that, you know, a lot of times it seems like all the focus is put on the woman in these circumstances, but, you know, men are affected by this as well. And as the video showed, it's not just women who feel regret and remorse and, you know, have this large burden that's carried with them for, you know, a lot of times the rest of their life. But it's also men. You know, men will pressure women into situations. Like one of the guys on the video was saying, "Hey, I met this girl. Pretty soon she got pregnant, and you know, I was like, you know, I said let's have an abortion. You know, and then now he's saying, you know, gosh, it's just, you know." now that I've grown in my faith and I'm like looking back on this, I'm so sorry. Like I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I didn't really think of the gravity of the situation. And, you know, they're talking about like, you know, just imagining what their child would look like. Would the child have been a boy or a girl? And what kind of experiences would you have had with that child? And so it's just really sad, you know, it puts a lot of sadness on somebody. And so I think it's important that, especially videos like that and outreach to people who are in those situations, I think it's important to connect with people on that level, and I think the video did a really good job of that.
I really like the point that you made about men. I think that's so important because men just get forgotten in this picture, like you said, and sometimes they're the ones pressuring the women, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they want the baby and they feel like they have no say because, oh, it's a woman's body, woman's choice. And they're the father of that child, and sometimes their heartbreak is so real and they can't do anything to save that child.
Absolutely.
So I think that's just a really good point that we have to remember, and men are absolutely suffering from this.
Absolutely,
as well.
more than one person involved. All right, let's go on to our next story. A pregnant TV host in China has refused cancer treatment after discovering that she had cancer and then gave the ultimate sacrifice in order to save her baby.
So what happened is this woman had late stage womb cancer.
Yes.
So obviously it's very sensitive because the womb is where the baby is.
Right.
And she ended up giving birth to a 3.3 pound baby 2 months early via C-section. And then they removed the tumor and began the chemo. And so, I mean, it's absolutely the ultimate sacrifice. And the story sort of details how she had shifted her focus from job to baby once she got pregnant. And, you know, you just see the love that she had for this child. And
absolutely.
That's a huge, difficult sacrifice to make. And I think, you know, church teaching here is pro-life, and I think it's good to go over that the goal is to save both lives. It's not that you kill. You
don't have to sacrifice yourself for your baby. You can get treatment
can try
while you're
to do
pregnant.
both. Yeah.
Right.
And so on one hand you have, oh well, you have to have the abortion and then do chemotherapy. On the other hand, you can say, oh well, I'm not going to do any chemotherapy until the baby's born. Or there's sort of this middle path that the church allows where you can try to do the treatment while you're pregnant. Sometimes the baby ends up dying from that. Sometimes the baby ends up living. Sometimes both people are saved. But the general view of the church is life affirming. We want to try to save both lives.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't undermine the heroic nature of what this mother did. She said, I don't want my child's life put at
danger.
risk from the chemo. I would rather put my own life at risk and delay the chemo until I have this child.
Right, so, and that's what I think makes it such a selfish or selfless decision, right? Because these other people seem to think that she made a selfish decision, and she, you know, and I think no, that wouldn't be a selfish decision. I think a selfish decision would have been to have an abortion and then say, oh, I'll just have another baby later. I'll get pregnant again, and I'll save my life and then have another baby. But she gave the ultimate sacrifice, and I think she really, truly showed that what she cared about was the life of her baby, right? Or even over the life of herself.
An incredible witness, especially in China, where they still have this one-child policy, even though it's been loosened somewhat. There's still a very, very, very heavy culture and government imposition of abortion and sterilization. So that act of witness in that culture, I think, was particularly powerful.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that because that hadn't crossed my mind, but that's especially true for someone in China.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Coming up after the break, we'll speak with a special guest about sex ed for teens.
Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Heroic Media. In case you're just joining us, I'm Patrick Cordova.
And I'm Michelle Bauman. For this segment, we have a special guest with us, Carrie Keating, the Natural Family Planning, Marriage, and Family Life Specialist for the Archdiocese of Denver. Carrie, thanks so much for being here with us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Today, the story that we will discuss, students at a Minnesota high school have started a sexual health education club. They say there is a need for meaningful discussion on sex that they are not getting in health class.
So, Carrie, what is your response to the story?
Well, it's not surprising, right? I think teens really like to have a forum and a place to discuss these topics. And but I think the concern is that you know, it's untethered. It's not really attached to a proper understanding of the human person. It's not framed in God's design and how He wants us to relate to one another. And so I think if the purpose of the club is to truly you know, help them to make these decisions for themselves, then I think we need to lay a proper foundation. And I think as Catholics, we're really blessed because we've got that foundation and that framework to help those teens. So
yeah.
John Paul II, I think, has given us a lot with love and responsibility and theology of the body.
Absolutely.
And so I think if we can teach teens that, that they're created in God's image, that they're created male and female, that they are created with an integrated body and soul, and what does that really mean? I think that's going to help them to give the proper framework for making these decisions.
And Carrie, who should be the primary people involved in sexual education? What is the role of the parents versus schools, the government?
Well, I think there's a lot of roles, right? We've got our teachers, we've got our, people at our churches, our religious ed directors, our youth directors. But I think primarily the job lies on the shoulders of the parents. And when we talk about marriage preparation, a lot of people aren't aware that there's 3 different phases of marriage preparation. So there's preparing the couple with the understanding of sexuality and their relationship, and we talk about NFP. But the immediate preparation is just the month before their wedding, and then we go to proximate preparation, which is like the beginning of engagement to that first month before their wedding. And then remote preparation is from the day that that person is born until the time that they're engaged. So that's really when the majority of their preparation and their understanding of their sexual identity, sexual relationships, all of that is being formed during that time in their lives. And most of that time is really in their own families.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think parents can take that knowledge, who take NFP especially, in Catholic circles particularly, and can apply that knowledge to their children when they're, getting to this age where they're trying to, learn about things and everything. I think that's a good point. Learning, taking that what you know from NFP and then being able to share that with your children as well, being primary educators of your children.
Right.
So along those lines, what advice do you have, I guess, for parents in addressing this topic of sexual education with their children?
I think teens really need to understand the differences between what the world offers when it says love, and then what God offers when we talk about love. And I think if parents can articulate that, clearly it's going to help kids a lot. And when we talk about the world's message of love, it's self-oriented. It's looking at the other person as an object for pleasure. And I think when we do that, there's lots of things that we kind of get pleasure from in life, but they're typically things, right? They're food or possessions, and once they've kind of run their course and their pleasure value that they bring to us, then we just, we throw it away. Right. We're done with it. And I think if the world's view of love is ultimately to find pleasure, then we're going to start blurring that line, and kids are going to see that, wow, there's not a big difference between me and a thing, and things are to be used, but people are not. And so, but God's love is the exact opposite, right? It's sacrificial, and it's seeking, the good of the other person, and it's a much more has a much more heroic end to it.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So, and it's in conjugal love. So conjugal love is in the marriage relationship. And so, and ultimately it results in new life.
Open to life, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think if that they see that there's a big difference between the two, and they'll see that in their family life, and it'll help them navigate that time.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, wonderful. Carrie, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for all of your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up after the break, we'll have one more story.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to Heroic Media. In our final story, the LGBT community has found greater acceptance in society today, and this has allowed homosexual Christians who remain celibate to emerge from the shadows. So I think this is a really timely topic, I guess.
Absolutely.
Right? Because so many times everybody's put in like a little box. Like this is a stereotypes, this is how homosexual people act, right? And so this is nice that people, it's kind of a mix of events, right? Because homosexuality in general is becoming, I guess, a subject or a topic that's easier to talk about, especially for homosexuals, because so many people have kind of emerged, and homosexual rights and things like that have come to the forefront of the news headlines and everything today. So this has allowed people who are homosexual but who would like to adhere to Christian principles and morals to come out and say, hey, listen, I exist. I am a homosexual person, but I choose to remain celibate because of my faith. And so I think that it's good. It's kind of one of these things where I'm pretty sure that gay advocate groups didn't realize that by basically creating an environment that was so open that then these people would come out.
It's an interesting, it's an interesting tie. And I think it's always important to remember what the church actually teaches on this. So the church says we don't reject the person. We're rejecting a certain action. So because a person is homosexual, because a person is attracted to someone of the same sex, we don't reject that person, right? We distinguish between that attraction and then the behavior. If you're acting on that, that's what the church says is sinful and wrong. So just simply because you have that attraction, that doesn't make you a bad Christian. That doesn't mean that you're going to hell.
Doesn't mean you're sinful.
Exactly. Right. We all deal with different temptations. And it's the action that the church is saying is problematic. And
absolutely.
So, and the situation of these individuals is very difficult if you're trying to be a Christian but you're also homosexual, because you have I think it's sort of been oversimplified in some cases in the past, the Christian community saying, hey, don't be gay, and then you have the LGBT community that's saying don't be celibate because somehow that's not living up to your identity and it's unfair.
You're not participating in equal rights if you do that.
And so as this is becoming more prominent, we see that the church is stepping up and speaking about it more. We see different Christian communities are. And they're sort of grappling with this because how do you deal with it? And there are some groups that are just saying, is it good or is it not for these people to identify by their sexual orientation? How do we approach this? What are the different ways we deal with this? But I think it's important that we do grapple with that because we don't want people to be ignored or just sort of shoved aside. And it's important that we have these issues out in the open and we discuss them and that we are able to give proper pastoral care to them. Yeah,
absolutely. And speaking of pastoral care, kind of ties into what I was about to say. I think it was one of the things that stood out to me when I was reading about these people that were coming out and saying, hey, I'm have homosexual tendencies, but I am also a Christian and I'm going to remain celibate. I thought one of the things that was interesting was that they were at such a wide array of Christian backgrounds. So typically you would associate somebody, at least I would, boxing people into these kind of, typical scenarios. You would think that they would be from more of like a conservative, what you might consider conservative or whatever, but which you might associate with like a more orthodox type of Christian religion like Catholicism. But there was really a wide array of different religions from Christian backgrounds, and I thought that was very interesting that just at the human person level there was such a desire to have that relationship with God, which one person, Eve Tushnet, she says that that's one of the outlets, one of the ways that you can kind of reframe the whole not having sex topic, celibacy. You don't focus on that, but you focus on deepening your relationships with other people and with God in order to get that level of intimacy, that closeness that you may be lacking because of your celibacy. So I thought that was a really interesting way to view it, and I thought that it was a good idea too.
I think that's a key point, is reframing it, because I think for so long celibacy has been understood or portrayed as a negative. Don't do X, don't do X. And now we're seeing this shift and trying to present this as an affirmative. It's not, whenever the church asks us to say no to something, it's because we're able to say yes to something greater. And so celibacy is saying no to a certain type of sexual relationship for the sake of saying yes to a relationship with God and a different type of interaction with other people. And so there are, Eve Tushnet, who you mentioned, says that celibacy allows you to give yourself more freely to God. So you're focusing on holy friendships, maybe community service, devotion to Mary. And I think the Catholic Church has a unique thing to offer here, because the Catholic Church has a very rich understanding of celibacy through the priesthood, religious life. That is an important part of our tradition.
Absolutely.
And sometimes maybe our Protestant brothers and sisters don't have that, so they're grappling a little more with how do you present celibacy where we already have that model that we can present. Exactly.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that crossed my mind too, thinking about the different diversity of people that were sharing their experiences. But it'd be real interesting to see, because I wonder if that's something that could draw them even closer to the Catholic Church as well.
Very interesting.
All right, that's it for this week on Heroic Media. Please join us next week for all the up-to-date news on the pro-life issues that matter to you.
Please feel free to write to us with any comments, questions, or news tips at news@heroicmedia.org.
And please check out our website at heroicmedianews.org, where you can read more stories like the ones we discussed on this episode.
That's it this week. Until next time, keep us in your prayers.
God bless.